Hello and welcome to a brand new episode and a very special episode of the Daily Debate for today. As for this week, we are celebrating the anniversary of the 6th of October war victory in 1973, which coincided back then with the 10th of Ramadan, of the holy fasting month of Ramadan, because tomorrow we'll be celebrating the anniversary on the 10th of Ramadan here in Egypt, the victory of Egypt and the Arabs against Israel. And today we'll be focusing on another battle and another victory for Egypt in the past few years, which will be continuing in the upcoming years as well. The battle of the economy, the battle of increasing exports to the outside world from Egypt, and strengthening of the small and medium enterprises in Egypt under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the current political leadership, which is encouraging the youth to be having more small and medium enterprises in the near future, as the same happened in the past 7 or 8 years under the tenure of President al-Sisi. As usual, we will be beginning with the latest top stories and the main headlines from Sunday, and beginning with the presidential activities of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the main top stories for today. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi had stressed the keenness on enhancing Egypt's ties with the European Union and boosting mutual coordination over the regional issues and challenges, as well as expanding the joint cooperation in various domains. The President's remarks came during the phone talks with the European Commissioner, President Ursula von der Leyen, where they discussed the repercussions of the coronavirus pandemic, especially the impacts on the energy and food security. For her part, the European Union official expressed the Union's appreciation for the strong relations with Egypt and the pivotal importance in Africa and the Middle East. On another front, and still with the main presidential headlines and the activities of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on Sunday, President al-Sisi also instructed on the day to expand the schemes on enlarging the use of the renewable energy in order to vary the energy resources. President al-Sisi's directives came during a meeting with the Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and the Minister of Electricity and Renewable Energy to follow up on the ongoing projects of the Ministry of Electricity across the country. The President also ordered to expand the wind power through the high production electricity generation units. As for the green hydrogen power generation, the head of state directed to back the efforts regarding the growing international concern for this domain. We will be returning to the main focus for the daily debate for tonight, the greeting sent from Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and the other ministers to President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, greeting His Excellency on the occasion or the anniversary of the 6th of October war victory in 1973, which coincided with the 10th of Ramadan, of the holy fasting month of Ramadan. We will be having more details about those greetings and this occasion in the upcoming report. Watching the daily debate celebrating the occasion of the 6th of October war victory in 1973, which coincided with the 10th of Ramadan, the holy fasting month of Ramadan. And tonight we will be focusing on the battle of the economy, of increasing the exports and encouraging the small and medium enterprises to be even better and bigger in the near future here in Egypt. And I'm honored to be focusing on this topic with Dr. Khaled, Dahawy, the Chair of Accounting Department at the American University in Cairo. Thank you very much for being with us tonight, and happy Ramadan.
Thank you, and happy Ramadan to you too.
First of all, the economy is a battle not just for Egypt, not just for the Middle East, not just for Africa, but for the world, especially with the coronavirus pandemic and then the crisis or the tension that is happening in Europe between Russia and Ukraine. How do you see the ongoing situation in Egypt regarding the current circumstances?
Well, as most of the world is actually now suffering during this new, if you will, future that was unexpected by many, many countries and analysts, we find that wars that happen in remote places affect the economy all over the world. It's no more that you have a war or a conflict in one area of the world that is secluded from the rest of the world. In reality, we find that the impact is very harsh and very quick. And these are 2 points that are very important to analyze. Harsh in the sense that our imports, our relationship in trade in that part of the world is very strong. Whether you talk about petroleum, you talk about wheat, you talk about tourism, we have a lot of relationships that affect our economy. Yes. Quick in the sense that it didn't take time, because people think that it will take years or something for these effects to impact. But what happens is it affects many countries, especially Egypt, very quickly. And therefore, it becomes very important to decide on how are we going to react to something like that in the midst of our original fight. So it is, if you will, we had a fight to make sure that our economy will grow. We had a fight within the COVID era. And this is the third level where you have a third economic war that happens. And so you're fighting unexpected. It's kind of a management crisis, which is very different than, and I feel for the government of Egypt and the presidency that is fighting all of these accumulated pressures in a time that's very hard to keep afloat. Because at the same time that we think that we've overcome the COVID, then you find the conflict and the tension. You overcome this more and more and more. Because, as you said, nowadays, very few real battles that are fought with weapons. Most of our battles are economic battles. And that goes across not just Egypt, but across the world. And only countries that will win are countries that can plan how to overcome these continuous flows of pressures, overflows of economic tightness that we have to go through that affect everybody across, not only the country, not only the Ministry of Finance, but we have to say has affected every individual in Egypt. Rich, poor, middle class, everybody's affected. So as you said, I guess it is a battle that is continuing.
Has it become more evident every year or every day that we needed the economic reform program before the coronavirus pandemic? We needed to be implementing the economic reform program as soon as possible?
Well, I mean, I'm a big believer in capitalism and the forces of capitalism and its powers of the market, or what Adam Smith called the invisible hand of the market. I'm a believer that it is very important for the Egyptian market to liberate its economy. We have seen over and over again in many countries that socialism is not a solution. We have seen that protectionism that has been used by prior Egyptian governments to protect industries. I mean, 2 of the very strong industries that were protected in Egypt are textile and cars. And the impact of protectionism has led to weaken instead of strengthen. So I guess in my mind and in many people's minds now today, this economic program, reform economic program, is a must. It wasn't a choice at that point. And I don't think it will ever be a choice, because nobody can or has been able in the history to overcome the market. You can overcome, you can protect the market for a while, but you cannot continuously keep that on a long span of time. That always backfires and results in weakening the market instead of strengthening it. It's like having a small baby and saying, I'm going to protect him or her from the forces outside. So you keep him inside the house and you close the house. So he becomes weaker and weaker instead of stronger and stronger. How does he become stronger? By getting him out and allowing him to play and compete in the real world. And that's really what it boils down to. We need to give our Egyptian economy the strength and then let it compete in the world. We cannot keep enclosing it and saying we're protecting it. We've seen, as I said, the protection in cars and textile. We now have no competitive advantage in either. And we're talking about liberating these industries. So in terms of the reform, I think it was a great, maybe a little bit late actually, should have been done earlier. But reform like that requires also a strong will, strong leaders, and decisions that sometimes upset people. Because with these reforms, somebody has to pay the price. And usually it's the people who have to pay the price. Now, how much will the people be able to suffer? How much will the elasticity of this demand or our economy before people get really, really hurt? It's going to see how it goes. But I don't think we had another choice. We couldn't have kept going the same pace we were going. And I think we actually were lucky that we did this before the COVID, actually. The COVID slowed us down, but then...
Was it planned, or were we lucky?
I think it was planned, but nobody knew of the timing of the COVID. So I guess we were lucky also, because you can plan, but then there's an intervention of God that, you know, you can plan as much as you want, but then there's always these interventions that will happen. I think our planning was good. The plan as it went was good. The timing was good. I hope it had happened earlier. But at the end of the day, I think we would have been in a worse situation if it hadn't happened.
Do you anticipate another economic reform program, other measures that could be protecting us from the upcoming conflicts in Europe, for example?
I think we will see some major program. I think the program is going to hurt individuals, but better the economy. Sometimes the medicine is not as sweet as we hope it is.
Bitter.
It is bitter.
Yes.
And unfortunately...
But it is needed.
The medicine we're taking is a medicine that, or the illness started like 70 years ago.
70?
I think it did, in the 60s. And through time, we've been trying to recuperate, but we haven't. And we've always been afraid of the social impact of economic reform. I think you can never, ever have what the Americans call a free lunch. For everything you get, you have to pay something. Nothing is free in the world. And to be able to take the medicine that is needed, which is the economic reform, you have to have a social suffering. The more you, if you ask me, the more you communicate this to the people, the more you inform the people, the better position you are. The problem we've had in the past is nobody informs people, and the communication is very little. If you have an open, transparent communication telling the people, this is what's going to happen, prices are going to go up, but this is going to happen because we want to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are targeting a growth percentage rate of X amount. We are targeting exports of such amount. We are targeting new companies of such amount. I've always felt that if you're going to do the reform, which is a capitalistic reform,
yes,
it has to come with it the rest of capitalism, which is openness, information, communication to the public, so everybody knows what's coming. It's not very good if you surprise people every now and then. Having said that, I don't think a lot of people anticipated the Eastern European conflict and the impact of that. So that in itself brought in a layer that wasn't expected, I think. And hopefully, my expectations and many people's expectation is that hopefully this is not going to be long. By next winter, hopefully, we'll have a better situation or a more rested situation in that area.
But in the past 8 years or 7 years under the tenure of President Al-Sisi and the new political leadership, we have this transparency, as you mentioned, Doctor, the process of explaining everything to the people. How did you see the response of the people to the economic reform program in the past years?
I think people are two levels. There's a level that understands their importance and the impact, who are supporting this program. There is the smaller or the poorer side of the social spectrum who are suffering dramatically, starting to really getting a little bit unhappy. But I think what's happening on the other side is very important, because there's a lot of two impacts. One is the part of the monetary subsidies, which are very, very useful, I think,
Yes.
and a lot better than the program that was an in-kind subsidies that were used before, that would go to anybody. The cash subsidies are helping people. It's easier to reach the poor economy. On the other side, there's real effect and real growth in the size of the peasants, the Said, the Upper Egypt, and so on. I remember I was in Ashmoon by coincidence 3 or 4 months ago. I was surprised. Munufaya, Ashmoon Munufaya. I was there for a private thing, and I wasn't planning to see anything, but I was just very surprised by the degree and the amount of the build-up that's happening in infrastructure there, and all the other villages around. And it's not anymore because there is someone important in this village, or there is someone who is related to someone important lives in this village. It is now organized, sequential, moving from one village to the other, where sewage, water, electricity, gas is being introduced to these cities. And I think people are seeing that. So these two together, as we were talking about, is more than any, if you will, any discussions. Talk is free and it's cheap. But when you see on the ground these two, and I think these are the most important things that have happened in the 7 or 8 years that you were talking about of the presidency of Sisi, has been that we've moved from this in-kind subsidy to cash subsidy. And on the other side, actually, this on-the-ground feel that people are seeing. Because we've heard promises before. It's only when real people feel real impact do you see the impact. And I think these two together are new to the economy. But we also have to understand that it's not a turnkey project. The real issue has always been in Egypt the trust of the people to the government. And that will take time. It's a learning curve that we have to learn to trust, and the government has to keep giving us reasons to trust.
Is it being built, the confidence between the citizens and the government now?
I think it is. I think it is. As I told you, these two cash subsidy and these on-the-ground projects are really, because people are seeing we're being affected. People are seeing that in real life, we have the government trying to help us. Instead of telling us growth is 20%. Who cares? At the end of the day, what am I feeling as an individual? And I think finally these two programs have helped the Egyptian individual understand that the government cares about him. That this money is not only taken, or the tax money is not only collected, or the borrowing is not only brought for the major macro impact, but we're seeing finally this transcending down to affecting or the effect or the individual, the poor individual is being affected by it. And I think that's a big plus.
Yes, Doctor, you mentioned a governorate like Al Munufiyya. So away from Cairo, Alexandria, even the touristic governorates like Aswan, Luxor, Al Munufiyya itself, and having this kind of infrastructure you've mentioned being built there, and it could be affecting the lives of people living there in the future. How can it be good for the economy on the long run to be affecting the lives of people living outside of Cairo, Alexandria, Luxor, Aswan?
Unfortunately, we've been a very bureaucratic, centralized economy, where, as you mentioned, Cairo has always been the center of development. And we've suffered from that people used to migrate from Upper Egypt, from the different areas of Egypt, migrate to Cairo, because Cairo is where everything was. For many years, to give you an example, we only had a centralized passport station where if you wanted to have a passport from Aswan, you'd come to Cairo. So all services, all development, everything was in Cairo. Now, I wouldn't even mention Alexandria. Then we started saying, well, we have some important cities, Alexandria and Port Said, Suez, and then, as you mentioned, the touristic cities like Sharm el-Sheikh, Dahab, and Nuweiba, and so on. Finally now, someone has recognized that this is not enough. This is not the core of Egypt. If you want to develop the core of Egypt, you have to go to Upper Egypt, to all the other delta areas and develop these areas. Only then, because you cannot develop a room in a house. Either develop the house or you don't develop the house. And we've been suffering because we only had one room called Cairo. And Cairo has grown to an extent that I think it's going to blow. And again, that brings us to another, one of the big projects that I think is very important
Building a new
now
capital.
is the new capital and moving the people outside of Cairo. For me, it's not, the new capital is important, but the most important goal is to diffuse Cairo. It's become a city that is congested and unplanned. You can have a city that has billions of people, but you plan for it. The problem is when you don't have planning. And when you don't have planning, you have areas that are completely problematic. And we see them today. I mean, if you drive on the ring road, and you drive and you see how the houses are and how the cities are, what's called the ashwayat, it's devastating.
Slums.
And these slums are actually, if you want to mention them as an area, are, I would say, quietly settled bombs. Because you have a problem, economic problem, many people living in unhuman areas, and they're populated a lot more than they should, with no services. Worse than slums that are all over the world, because all what you have to do is these people can find proper medicine, can find proper housing, can provide schooling, and so on and so forth. The core is in planning. If you can plan well, you can accommodate millions. If you don't plan well, you cannot accommodate thousands. This is at least how I see it.
So the slums could have turned into an economic problem. On the other hand, how did building new cities all over Egypt and building the new administrative capital become a solution to an economic problem?
What you're doing is diffusing Cairo from being the problem, building areas that are planned. We also have to remember something that I think we talk too much about economics and forget about human beings.
Yes.
We first have to understand that there is a human being that needs and requires a good life, a human life. And that requires a minimum level of economic consistency. And if you take this away from people, you have a problem. As long as we are building and diffusing and moving people from these slums to better societies, planned societies, giving them their human rights of what the Constitution gives them, I think you're opening the door for a solution on two levels. The first level on the human, social side, creating people that are not having problems. And this is very important, by the way. Many times you forget about that, that if you don't have people who are, I'm a doctor of accounting.
Yes.
And I've always seen that if you create human beings that are well educated and well brought up, you have an asset that you can use to develop. But on the other side, if you create many people and they are not educated and not well brought up, you have a huge liability because you have to feed them, you have to take care of them, and you have to do everything for them, which is a heavy economic burden on the country. So if you're really going to build something, you have to build the correct human being. Knowing that the last I read, almost two-thirds of the Egyptian people are below 30 years. So you have a great asset to build. If you educate them, if you give them the right living environment, making them feel that they are real human beings, this is the starting point. But if you keep treating them leaving them in the slums, making them believe that nobody cares about them, this is a whole big spectrum of a social problem that needs to be resolved. And it's underburning the economic problem. If you only focus on the economic problem, you're focusing on a short-term solution. Going deeper and solving the social problems with it is a very hard time, and it is time-consuming. But it's a real problem. The economic issue is on top of
It's the base.
social. And if we keep looking only at economies and not making sure we follow or develop the education and the educational system, you are building people that are unable to keep the economic reform going. Because It's not a, yani, you asked me a question and I think we missed it in the middle.
Yes.
The reform is not going to be one time. The reform is a continuous process. And as long as we understand it's a one time, if you understand it's a one time, it's not correct. You keep changing and developing, getting better and getting better. It's not a turnkey and then we're going to relax on the beach for the rest of our life. But to keep this country with its 100 or 120 or 110 million, we have to remember every day that we give birth to a new country. Every year, my understanding is we increase by about 2.5 million people. There are countries in the Middle East that are a lot smaller than that.
Yes.
So you can imagine the degree of challenges if you don't change and develop, and the degree of challenges to sustain the development. Because we always talk about development as if we're going to turn the key and we're going to be an economic country. That's the end of it. But with what challenges we have, with the number of births we have, it's a continuous battle. To bring us back to your premise at the beginning,
Yes.
a battle, it is a battle, and the economic battle will continue. Maybe we're not going to fight people with weapons anymore, but we fight every day for the right of living as humans.
And it's even harder to be changing the lives of people here in Egypt. We will be turning to the industrial development here in Egypt under the political leadership of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the current government of Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli in the upcoming report. So let's see it.
Small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, are the engines of economic growth and employment, accounting for, on average, 60% of GDP and 70% of employment in developing economies. In recent years, SMEs have also been at the crest of innovation, taking advantage of their smaller size and agility to respond more rapidly to technological or commercial opportunities in areas such as renewable energy. However, SMEs still face numerous obstacles which often limit their scope for growth and undermine their long-term sustainability. Egypt has around 2.5 million SMEs, accounting for 75% of the labor force, many of which are involved in manufacturing. In some cases, SMEs are at the forefront of some of the most innovative and emerging sectors, such as biotech, renewable energy, green ICT, and services. Financing constraints for SMEs are often attributed to supply and demand side knowledge asymmetries. Banks face difficulties in assessing the creditworthiness of SMEs, which can discourage lending to these firms. Traditional lenders are typically wary of lending to smaller firms without substantial collateral and charge for higher interest rates. Egypt has taken steps to address funding shortfalls in recent years by creating sovereign wealth funds for SMEs, reforming tax systems to foster small business growth, or incentivizing commercial lenders to extend credit lines to these types of businesses, among other measures. The Central Bank of Egypt has also directed commercial banks to increase the number of loans awarded to SMEs to 20% of their total portfolio. The government is also supporting SMEs through attractive free zone offerings. Free zones built specifically for SMEs are strategically located along the Suez Canal, are set to give light industries and services sector companies access to various key global trade routes. Simplifying regulations is another measure required to support SME management in global trade. Trade facilitation reforms streamline trade and reduce administrative time and costs, especially for SME exporters that are often most affected by varying customs procedures around the world.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate and celebrating the occasion and the anniversary of the 6th of October war victory in 1973, which coincided with the 10th of Ramadan, the holy fasting month of Ramadan. But tonight we're focusing on the battle of economy for Egypt, as we can see the circumstances all over the world, the conflict in Europe and the coronavirus pandemic. Dr. Khaled Dahawy, if we can speak about The battle of economy, the small and medium enterprises, are they a weapon for us in this battle? Are they a good tool for us, for Egypt, in this battle?
I think it is our only weapon in this battle. If you look at the numbers that were just mentioned in the report that came about a minute ago, and you see the number of Egyptian people involved in small and medium enterprise, either in numbers of companies or in individuals working in these companies, you will notice that they are the main fuel of the economic move of Egypt. We cannot actually move without that weapon. It is the core of Egyptian economy, and it's also the problem of the Egyptian economy. Because for many years, nobody looked or understood the small and medium enterprises. For many years, we opted to look for solutions for industrialization and large companies, and focus because they're bigger, because they have bigger names, because they have bigger funding. They always attracted the communication world. When in reality, at the core of the Egyptian economy is the small and medium enterprises. And I'm very happy to see that finally we are looking at these companies, understanding that this economy is not the economy. There's sectors of the economy that you need to focus on. The needs of major international companies are very different than the small and medium enterprises. The requirements is very different. And I'm happy to see that now we're finally looking and saying, well, but you know what? They need special attention. They're small, they are risky, they are badly funded, and they're badly managed. And you need to work on these sections of the small and medium enterprises. They are not well equipped as the large corporations that can find consultants, that have the funding to buy know-how. They have a completely different battle, as we said before.
Yes.
And we need to work with them. Two things that I heard in the report that was being mentioned a minute ago, taxes and simplification of processes. If you are a small and medium enterprise, simplification of processes is number one. Because it is very hard for you to have an idea to start a company and then you meet the bureaucratic system. The bureaucratic system needs engineers and accountants and lawyers and a whole army of support that large corporations can handle. But you go down to the small and medium enterprise and it is amazing how much support they need and how much they're badly funded, and they cannot find that support. So the role of the country or the government is to provide that support. And one of the support systems is to simplify these processes for them. You need to be able to start a new company in one day. And I'm not talking about going to the investment authority. I'm talking about getting a license to operate, talking about getting water, getting electricity, owning the place you're going, and so on. All of these processes need to finish. We have a problem in Egypt in general that is very different than the rest of the world. Our process of governmental operation is an individual who takes the paper around and around and around. And you go through different windows. And we talk about making sure that the many windows become one window. In reality, this is an issue that is very important. In the rest of the world, you want to start a company, you go to one, you present your papers. The paper has its root. It does everything, and you have to go and on the other side after a period that is given, and you receive your licenses and appropriate documentation. Here in Egypt, you have to run from this window to this window to get the approval of this ministry. And I don't want to name ministries, but
yes,
the process is very different. Someone has to work on this process. If we are able to simplify that process for our companies, that, as we said, is, and it's all my own words, is our only weapon, only will economic development come. Because we cannot justify only the economic development on multinationals or large companies, given the size and of our small and medium enterprise economies. The other side is taxes, or the other side is taxes.
yes,
There's a new law that came out for small and medium enterprises, and this is very important, simplifies the taxing system. and it gives some constant tax numbers, so you don't have to hire accountants like ourselves. But it's very important for these companies to have, if you work for X amount per year, you pay this X amount. Nobody will come and tell you, give me a bribe, let's increase, let's reduce. It's a cutoff amount. And I think that's a very great idea and a starting point for that. Because once you decrease the individual involvement in taxes, you reduce the involvement in fraud, unfortunately, in Egypt.
The digitalization, would it make it easier for people to be having more ideas and be more encouraged to be starting their own businesses?
I think digitalization is very important. It is the new revolution in the world. I mean, after many years of the Industrial Revolution, the new revolution is digitalization.
Yes.
Digitalization is the future, whether we like it or not. There are things in life that you cannot deny its existence, and it's going to consistency for the future, and digitalization is one. It's taking over the world by storm. It's involving everything we do. But again, it's a tool. And as I've learned as a little kid, a knife is a tool. You use it to kill a person, it's a bad tool. You use it to cut your food and peel oranges, it's a good tool. So digitalization is what we use it for. If we use it to the advantage of our economy, it's a great tool. If we use it otherwise, it's a problem. Because with digitalization comes a new freedom that we are unaware of, a new openness of a market that is unheard of. With the internet, I mean, I remember as a student for a PhD, the hardest thing was to get data. It was always very hard. But when you got the data, it was in a book, it was verified by somebody. Today, with digitalization and the internet and this free economy as a whole, if you put this all in a package, you're facing endless information, but unverifiable information. It is very hard to understand what is correct and what's not correct, what is verified data and what is not. So it's a new battle, but at the same time, it is amazing. I mean, the opportunities are unlimited. And add to that the new use of artificial intelligence and that level of sophistication. We are seeing things that were dreams 5 or 10 years ago. And that's another thing, that's another challenge that I think you need, and we need years to understand, because in the past, technology would pass generations. Today, in one generation, we see many technologies die and live. And that's a completely different economy. And we need to be aware of that increase in the pace of technology and our lack of ability of our education system to meet that technology.
Yes. The SMEs, Doctor, and my final question, because you mentioned that the small and medium enterprises are the only weapon for Egypt to be getting better and better for the future. How do you see the future of the SMEs here in the country in 1 minute?
I see it developing because I see that we've solved 50% of the problem, is understanding that there's a problem, which is the uniqueness of SMEs and uniqueness of the solutions that are needed for SMEs. That the market is actually divided between large and small and medium enterprises. We need to understand that these enterprises need special treatment, need special laws, need special processes. And I think we've learned that lesson. The next couple of years will be how to implement these changes and how can you help these enterprises grow, because their growth means the growth of the Egyptian economy, and their failure will mean the failure of the Egyptian economy. And therefore, I think they are tied together in a manner that you cannot anymore distinguish from each other.
Yes, Dr. Khaled Dahawy, the chair of Accounting Department at the American University in Cairo. Thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
The pleasure is all mine. And this brings us to the end of the Daily Debate for tonight. Thank you for watching and goodbye.